name is Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and here are the top international news highlights for the past 24 hours. Gaza ceasefire stalls on Phase 2 transition. Middle East, the transition to complex second phase of the U.S. brokered ceasefire in Gaza is facing severe challenges. Hamas officials threaten to delay entry into the second phase until Israel meets demands to open a key border crossing, cease attacks along the dividing line, and allow significantly more aid into the territory. Israel announced it would reopen the Allenby crossing with Jordan to allow the passage of goods and aid. A minor concession, however, reports detail continued Israeli drone strikes near Khan Yunis that killed 5 Palestinians, including 2 children, in violation of the truce. Thailand and Cambodia escalate border conflict. The border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia has sharply escalated. Following recent skirmishes, the Royal Thai Air Force reportedly conducted several airstrikes against the Cambodian military targets, resulting in 9 civilian deaths and 20 wounded. Conversely, 3 Thai soldiers were killed and 29 injured during clashes with Cambodian soldiers. This marks one of the most significant military escalations between the two nations in decades. Sudanese civil war sees key city fall. The Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in Sudan have captured Baba Nusa. They've captured Baba Nusa, the last stronghold of the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, in West Kordofan. This victory marks a critical strategic gain for the RSF in the ongoing civil war. UN Security Council briefing on Ukraine. The UN Security Council met for a high-stakes briefing on the Russo-Ukrainian war, addressing rising civilian casualties and renewed strikes on energy infrastructure as winter sets in. The meeting aimed to gauge the diplomatic status of the revised U.S.-led peace proposal, which has seen revisions following pushback from Kiev and European allies. EU leaders continue stinging rebuke of U.S. strategy. European leaders, including the European Council President Antonio Costa and the German government, continue to criticize U.S. national security strategy, NSS, which is largely structured in a way that is incredibly similar to Russian law. They focused on the NSS's claim that Europe faces civilizational erasure and its explicit statement that the U.S. will cultivate resistance to the EU's current trajectory. Costa warned that allies should not threaten to interfere in the domestic political choices of their partners, reflecting a fundamental shift in the transatlantic relationship. Russian response, notably the Kremlin, welcomed the U.S. strategy, stating it corresponds in many ways to our vision, particularly regarding the end of the conflict in Ukraine. And probably also the destruction of the EU, which is where NATO is located. Ukraine membership deemed inevitable despite Hungary. The European Union enlargement chief stated that Ukraine's EU membership is inevitable despite Hungary's continued objections to the process. This maintains the political commitment to Kiev's long-term integration into the bloc. IMF upgrades China's economic growth forecast. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, upgraded its growth projections for China to 5% in 2025 and 4.5% in 2026, citing strong exports and fiscal stimulus. However, the IMF warned that China's reliance on export-led growth is excessive and risks furthering global trade tensions. Pakistan receives additional IMF funding. The International Monetary Fund approved the release of an additional $1.2 billion to Pakistan to assist with recovery from its severe economic crisis, bringing the total received since last year to $3.3 billion. Taiwan and Tajikistan report cross-border attacks. Asia Security, Tajikistan reinforced its border with Afghanistan after claiming that recent drone strikes that killed 2 Tajik, and 3 Chinese citizens originated from its neighbor. The Southern Transitional Council, STC, in Yemen captured all 8 southern governorates and seized swaths of territory from the internationally recognized government, raising the possibility of the STC claiming independence for South Yemen. Bipartisan coalition demands increased security funding for federal judges. A bipartisan coalition of 47 state attorneys general sent out a letter to congressional leaders demanding increased funding for the security of federal judges and their families. The demand follows reports that threats and hostile incidents against judges are at all-time highs, with over 100 judges nationwide reporting they have been doxxed with unsolicited, intimidating deliveries to their homes. The judiciary's court security program has been under a hard freeze for 2 consecutive years, leaving resources inadequate for essential security needs. DoD authorizes AI use for all Pentagon employees. The Department of Defense, DoD, announced it will deploy Google's Gemini AI through the new Gen AI MIL platform, allowing all Pentagon employees to use the generative AI for unclassified work on their computers. This institutional adoption is a significant move to embrace advanced technology, though Google Cloud, no DoD data will be used to train Google's public models, addressing data security concerns. They're going to use Google Cloud to handle Pentagon operations. What the fuck? No, that doesn't sound secure at all. Federal agency blocks Chinese linked export loopholes. The Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, issued a rule to close major loopholes in its export controls. The new rule automatically subjects any entity that is at least 50% owned by a named entity on the Entity List or Military End User MEU list to the same stringent export restrictions. This is a targeted effort to prevent China from circumventing controls on sensitive U.S. technology. Immigration agents used pepper spray in Minneapolis. Federal immigration agents used pepper spray to clear a crowd in Minneapolis in order to access their vehicles following an identification sweep tied to the administration's crackdown on Somali immigrants. The incident, confirmed by local officials and media, highlights the continued friction and potential for escalation during federal immigration enforcement actions against citizens and non-citizens. Congressman warns Moldova is next target after Ukraine. Representative Don Bacon, he is a Republican from Nebraska, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee's Cyber Subcommittee, publicly warned that Russia will not stop with Ukraine and predicted that Moldova will be next, further stating the Baltic states are under serious threat. Bacon used this prediction to criticize the new U.S. National Security Strategy, NSS, for reportedly failing to adequately address Russia as a serious military threat, arguing for increased defense spending on electronic warfare. Local resistance to massive AI data centers. Local opposition is growing across rural America as communities face permit applications for massive new power plants intended to serve large energy-intensive AI data centers. In places like Tucker County, West Virginia, residents are organizing to protect their local economies and natural environments, citing concerns over the huge demand for land, water, and power that these centralized AI computing hubs require. DoD authorized to withhold pay from baseless protesting contractors. The proposed Fiscal Year 26 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, includes a new rule authorizing the Department of Defense to withhold up to 5% of payments from an incumbent contractor who files a bid protest that is later dismissed by the GAO. I don't know why I always see that. Like when I see GAO, GAO, is that my brain is the GAO. The GAO, the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, for lacking any reasonable, factual, or legal basis. If enacted, this measure is designed to reduce the number of baseless bid protests that often delay and increase the cost of critical federal procurements. GAO finds high fraud risk in ACA tax credits. Well, investigate it then. All they do is write reports. They're not very, I mean, they write reports. That's what they do that is useful. They write reports. I'm not going into that one. Ukraine peace talks and war developments. UK, Germany, and France held a joint call with U.S. President Trump to coordinate work on a Ukraine peace plan. Leaders agreed to intensify diplomatic efforts as Russia's invasion continues. Meanwhile, Ukraine indicated it may hold wartime elections in the next 3 months, though legal obstacles remain. Ukrainian forces also reportedly repelled a Russian mechanized assault and targeted a Russian Shadow Fleet oil tanker with a drone strike. U.S.-Venezuela incident. U.S. forces seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, prompting Caracas to condemn the action as international piracy. The tanker was reportedly linked to illicit oil shipments tied to Iran. The operation involved the USS Gerald R. Ford and drew sharp criticism from Venezuelan officials, an escalation with potential diplomatic ripple effects across the region. Indonesia and Sri Lanka cyclone aftermath, 950 lives lost. Your earthquake and tsunami alerts lifted in Japan. A 7.5 magnitude quake prompted tsunami warnings yesterday. Technically day before yesterday, depending on when I started recording. The Ukraine peace talks involving major NATO allies and the U.S. signal potentially pivotal moment in the war. Now in its 4th year, the U.S. seizure of a Venezuelan-linked tanker adds a new layer to simmering U.S.-Latin America tensions and energy security geopolitics. I mean, this war should have been over a long time ago, and the reason why it is so bad, right? Like, he's just handing it over to Russia right now, and destroying America, and nothing good is happening, and the world is cascading into world war, and we're all just watching this happen. Like, what the fuck? Rising Saudi UAE tensions in Yemen conflict. Tensions between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have escalated after UAE-backed forces, the Southern Transitional Council, seized key provinces in southern Yemen, including Hadhramaut, challenging Saudi-aligned groups. Saudi forces reportedly withdrew from Aden in response, deepening a rift between two Gulf allies and threatening broader regional peace efforts. U.S. backs Japan after Chinese military radar incident. The U.S. formally criticized China for directing military radar at Japanese aircraft near Okinawa during exercises, the most serious such interaction in years. Washington reaffirmed its security commitment to Japan as tensions rise over Taiwan and disputed islands. China dismissed the criticism and accused Japan of provocation. Ukraine Shadow Fleet crippled by SBU strikes. Ukraine's security services SBU used sea drones to disable Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the Black Sea, part of a campaign targeting vessels used to circumvent Western sanctions on Russian oil. The operation aligns with broader efforts to cut revenue streams funding the war. U.S. threatens ICC with sanctions over potential Trump prosecution. The U.S. announced it might impose new sanctions on the International Criminal Court unless the court amends its founding treaty to preclude prosecution of former U.S. officials, including Donald Trump, and closes probes into alleged war crimes by Israeli and U.S. forces. Because the U.S. is not an ICC member, this threat spreads into broader international, legal, and political arenas. This concludes the international news highlights for today. I'm going to go now. Bye.
So the Olympics is great. And Johnny, for the others, the World Cup, Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. I got both of them. I got the Olympics and I got the World Cup. And I said, it's too bad. One was in 2026 and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election and now we won. So I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So, Johnny, thank you for the World Cup. And everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment on my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah! And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, because MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA. Abolish MAGA. Fuck you, MAGA.